the gap between Urza and Misaki is not, it's clearly not nearly as big as the gap between Kieran and Laxus. Like when there's a description of guild arts and Laxus, I feel like that's not like, it's not a one for one, but it's an understandable enough kind of like gauge where they're relatively in the same tier, but one of them is obviously much more further progressed within said tier. Like you can look at like Alvarez, and you can look at some of like the feats and capabilities of what Laxus and Guild Arts were doing. Kind of hard to do when Laxus was not in his best health, but we can still kind of gauge it in the instances where he wasn't hindered by the anti-magic in his body. But I think pretty much anybody can guess that Guild Arts was stronger just based off of some of the stuff that he was doing, and he's still depicted as such. So with this, I think this is obviously going to be a good way for both of them to kind of like start to get up to that gap. But right now, like Urza's looking obviously that Misaki's stronger, but it doesn't seem like she is this unpassable foe. We'll see. We don't know entirely about Misaki. And Urza just got obviously stronger being an Ellen tier and picking up some of the skills and stuff while she was an Ellen tier. And when you really kind of like compare where she's at now to where she was before, obviously there's a significant jump. There was the whole Nadia in The Last Chapter that she was controlling her armor, which is her magic, not her body, which she was kind of doing a little bit in Ellen tier, but now obviously to a higher degree, which is obviously impressive. But I feel like that's not going to be enough to really defeat Misaki. She's going to really need to actually start pulling out some better strategies, some more kind of combos. I'm wondering if she could do something like summon literally just like a suit of armor and then kind of use it as kind of like a footing spot. Like if she put one directly underneath her and then kind of like kicked off on it, or like used her arms to press off on it. Or if she did something like maybe kind of did like what Thor does, where he's got like, you know, his hammer is absurdly heavy, he spins it enough and then just the force will take him. Like if Ursula did something like that with a sword, maybe she's got like a really heavy sword or like a gravity sword. I mean, I can see it, you know, gravity core reference, but it would have to be a way that's just a nod and obviously not as big. I feel like for how the fight's going to end, one, I don't think the fight's going to end here. My guess is it's going to go for like another chapter or so and then get interrupted and split, because I don't think any of the matches really should be over for the Diablos members and the rivals. Like their respective rivals in the main cast, the only one being Lucy and Kyria, because that one I think was actually adding grounds to be the like actually done, and where it's like, okay, I can see where this played out in obviously like its full manner, because Kyria's not like the big character we're gonna see. She's not, you know, the big hype out of the enemy group. She's, like I said, the weakest, I would say, out of the Diablos members. The only other one being Mad Mole, but I feel like Mad Mole is slightly stronger. So when we look at like where their capabilities start, and you look at how they kind of like contrast to the other characters, I feel like Kyria is the only one that logically could go down, because like none of the Dark Dragon Slayer Knights, I think realistically would be like out by now. The only one you could say is Haku, but we know that Haku didn't lose in a straight fight. You know, the whole stuff with like him and Wendy, you know, there is context behind that you have to understand. So with the Misaki stuff, one, I'm hoping that Misaki plays a little bit more seriously now that she seems mad with Urza. Who's probably going to get more of that clear like edge on her side, much more powerful, and like Urza's going to need her bigger things to really do anything. Because like at the end of it, like before we even get to certain things, Misaki's still a Dragon Slayer, so she's still going to have things like durability and just like raw like physical strength over Urza. Like just that body capability is going to be much more than what Urza, at least from what we know, can do. So when we look at all that and we see like where she is, unless Misaki takes damage from her blue dimension, like the whole second equals an hour of damage, but I kind of feel like she won't, because, you know, we know that Dragon Slayers aren't really affected by their own abilities and stuff. Hers might be an exception because it's like a weird effect of like the dimension she's in, but at the same time, that should be part of her magic and her Dragon Slaying abilities, so I don't know if it's going to be actually affecting her. Like it could go either way very logically, where it's like, okay, the rules of it also apply to her, but also she's a Dragon Slayer, so it doesn't at the same time. We'll see. Like obviously that's a big thing for her question of like what's going on. We saw her take damage, but we didn't see her and Urza leave the dimension before, you know, any follow-up stuff happened, and we gotta wait a week before we see anything else. So It's just one of those things where we're just gonna have to sit idly by. With their match, though, I'm willing to bet that Urza is not going to be looking as good in the next chapter, because I think the way that it was set up, Urza looking good in the first one, was to kind of like set that tone, set an understanding of where they're at. Whereas like Misaki was not clearly fighting that seriously. I mean, she only really used like one attack. She used like just the blue stream, and she looks mad at the very end, obviously, when she got hit. So I'm willing to bet that now she's probably going to start taking some of her more casual ways of doing things and put them aside to actually fight. Urza obviously isn't at her full potential, but Misaki definitely, we know, is not fighting with her full level of power. So I'm actually really hoping this fight is more of a like building up kind of like the issues between them. Kind of like how Nasu and Suzaku was, how Lactus and Kirin was, where it's like this first encounter, you understand like the gap between them, they can kind of like feel each other out, and then they are able to kind of develop a actual character-related conflict rather than just being enemies. Because that's one of the things I've been super hyped about with all the Diablo stuff, is so far it seems that all the Diablos members and the Fairy Tail cast members that have beef with them have some form of personal name that connects to them in some way, shape, or form. The only one right now we don't have is Mad Mole, because like with Skullion and Gray, we know that there's that confrontation they had back in outside of Elmina, whereas we don't have anything for Mad Mole and Gajeel yet. Maybe we'll get something. Maybe we'll get something for them soon. My hopes are that, like I said, we get more of the Misaki Urza fight, and then it gets interrupted. Maybe for some reason they have to split, and then that's when Mad Mole and Gajeel take over and stuff happens like that. We could get maybe like a prolonged fight, maybe like an Urza versus Urza match where it's like we see it off screen and there's like some form of either issue that stops it we don't know about, we're going to find out later, or it could just be a really long fight. I think that would be really cool if we got like Urza and Misaki had some form of off-screen fight where it's like, oh, Urza and her have gone, like after a while, like say like we get through a couple more fights, we see some other stuff going, and then we get back to them, and it's like, oh, well, Urza and Misaki both have been fighting like this for, whatever it is, a half hour in real time, but we used the whole stuff with Blue Dimension and we're able to kind of like look at the actual like damage-wide scale of where things are going. At the moment, Misaki seems to be like, her power is cool. Her Dragon Slaying attribute is cool. We don't really know entirely if it's a dimensional dragon or spatial dragon or what, but her whole ability is obviously neat. The thing right now I'm wondering is like when she goes up against Urza, is she gonna start pulling up more stuff? Because the thing about Urza, less so than Lucy, but still a factor, is like the combinational utility of her abilities. Whereas like if Misaki doesn't have additional things, like she's going to be at a disadvantage just from when you look at their movesets. I mean, she's got her own values and benefits, but when you look at like some of the stuff that you can bring with just all those different abilities, all the different things you can try out, combo together, it's just looking like Urza has the powerized advantage just from what she can bring to the table. Whereas like we don't know much about Misaki, we just know she's powerful and stuff. We don't know entirely what she's going to be able to drop down for Urza to deal with. So we'll see on that. I mean, I'm sure she's got like multiple techniques that we haven't seen, other broken abilities and different ways of dispensing her stuff. I mean, all she really needs, because like similar to Doom, she really doesn't need too many extra abilities. She just needs more ways to use the effect of her Blue Dimension. Definitely probably want some more other things, but I mean, like that's her primary thing. You want to make sure your primary thing is good. So she probably is going to start pulling out different directional attacks and maybe like just different ways to kind of combo, maybe the higher levels of Dimension rather than Blue Dimension. I feel like it'd be kind of needed because her title isn't Blue Dragon, her title is Azure Dragon, and we don't even know what her actual attribute is. So in the next chapter, I mean, I've mostly been ranting, but I mean, like it's like there's a lot of like potential for the next chapter and where it can go, because like I'm guessing it's going to be an Urza and Misaki focused fight, but like the fight itself, I think is just kind of like, again, the first confrontation, the first bits. I'd be willing to bet that this fight isn't going to be over relatively soon, because like if Misaki is out and Urza's already got that conflict done, then it's like, well, then what's Urza going to do for the rest of the arc? We don't know if Ursa's going to have anything with Selene or stuff with Jalal's going to eventually show up, or who knows. But so far, all of the Fairy Tail members have had set up enemies, and obviously the Dark Dragon Slayer Knights are way more powerful than the rest of Diablo. So they're added mystery, but also their strength-wise is something that I think should last longer. And clearly Kieran's last longer. Haku, we only saw lose in a situation where he wasn't actually like trying to aggressively win. And Suzaku and Natsu still isn't really settled. We got the first match, but I mean, like, that was more like that was entirely because Natsu decided to go into base and wasn't using any of his other forms, and Suzaku just in base is dramatically above Natsu in base. But like their fight wasn't really decided in like an actual like 1-for-1 match. It was more of just Natsu got a little careless in how he approached him, and then their second match got interrupted, but it was like obviously leaning towards Natsu. We don't even really have that full conclusion of where their bouts go. And obviously Kieran and Laxus only got a first kind of appearance and match between them, understanding of the gap and where these two characters are at. And I think that's going to be about where that is with Urza and Misaki, but obviously not nearly as much as Laxus and Kieran. Like Laxus and Kieran is, from what I would guess, is kind of like how Natsu and Laxus were early, whereas I feel like with Urza and Misaki, I guess it would be kind of like if you just kind of gauged. I think more so Laxus and Urza in the fighting festival rather than now, because now Urza's not that much away from him. But back in the fighting festival, it was very clear that Laxus was a good portion stronger, but not so much stronger that Urza couldn't keep up with him and couldn't contend. Like, it's just one of the things, like, a character can be stronger. It doesn't mean 100% they're going to win, as long as, like, their opponent can fight them, can contend with them. Whereas, like, if it's obviously the gap is so big that, like, you can't even really see, like, these dudes move or hurt them or really handle their attacks. Because Urza's obviously withstanding some of Misaki's abilities. Misaki is having a little bit of trouble with Urza's abilities. Like, there's actually, like, there's the idea that this could actually be a fight. Whereas, like, if you put Misaki against, I don't know, someone like Rogue or Sting by themselves, I'd be like, yeah, they're screwed. There's no way they're going to be able to do it. Them together is, like, a little bit more believable, but obviously, you know what I mean? Where it's like, yeah, this character's not going to do well. Whereas, like, Urza, I knew Urza was obviously going to be weaker than Misaki going into it, but, like, we didn't really know the entirety of, like, where in that gap. But it's at a point now where we can look at it and say, like, it's understandable if Urza is actually able to, like, mess with her attacks, dodge up when you look at, like, where she's at, capabilities, where we kind of can understand where the Dark Dragon Slayer Knights are, and compare that with, again, where she's at, and I think everything checked out. So we'll see exactly where this goes. My hopes for the next chapter are mostly just, like, some cool abilities from Misaki, maybe a name drop for her Dragon Slayer attribute, and maybe something new from Urza. I'm really hoping that at the end we get something like a Grand Chariot infused sword. Because if Wendy taught her how to do, like, regular enchants into weapons, she should be able to do Grand Chariot. And I think that'd be really cool, because then she doesn't have to worry about, like, the setup, put it in the blade and strike, have a star sword. Maybe that'll be the thing Mishima wants to do. We'll see. I've been really hoping we get something like that, since we've gotten, like, the introduction of Urza having these enchanted swords from people around her. Anyway, other than that, comment below, thumbs up the video, but from the like button, subscribe button, check out my other videos. But I appreciate all these arts, subscribe, and thank you all for listening. Bye.